Welcome back. Today we're exploring a chilling case that shook Iron River, Michigan in early 2016, a time when the snow still clings stubbornly to the pines, and the small community's trust is about to be ripped apart. The victim, a once respected local man whose life took a sudden and dark detour, is discovered under horrifying circumstances. At first, no one wants to believe that something so grim could happen in their quiet corner of the Upper Peninsula. It starts quietly, a missing persons report, filed by a concerned coworker, a few discreet questions asked by a patrol officer. But soon, the police realize they're dealing with something far more sinister than a mere disappearance. By the time an overworked detective scrapes the ice off his windshield at 6 in the morning and drives through those frozen streets to follow a faint lead, it's clear that this is going to be no ordinary case. On one side there is Kelly Cochran, a charismatic but troubled woman in her mid-30s, who possesses a strange magnetism that pulls people into her orbit. On the other side there is her husband, Jason Cochran, a quiet, unassuming man who seems perpetually overshadowed by Kelly's forceful personality. The dynamic they share appears complicated, even before the blood and bone fragments are found. As the days roll on and the police dig deeper, it becomes impossible to ignore the growing mountain of evidence pointing toward them. Eventually, their secrets unravel, leaving the community reeling and desperate for answers. We begin to discover the truth as investigators peel back layers of deceit, betrayal, and abnormal appetites. Friends, family members, and neighbors will recall odd moments, suspicious glances, and menacing conversations that they once brushed off. By the end, what emerges is a portrait of two deeply flawed people, bound together by something far darker than love, leading to a crime so disturbing that it haunts the region long after sentencing. Tonight, we delve into the origins of this twisted union, the victims caught in its web, and the heartbreak it left behind. Kelly Cochran, at 34 years old, stands about 5 feet 6 inches, with dark, shoulder-length hair that sometimes falls limply over her pale face. At a glance, she seems ordinary. Brown eyes, average build, a faint dusting of freckles. But there is something unsettling about the way her gaze lingers a fraction too long, how her smile can turn forced and artificial in the blink of an eye. Growing up in a working-class family in Indiana, Kelly's parents struggled financially. As a child, she was bright but restless, often ditching school to hang out with older kids. There are accounts of childhood fights, minor thefts, and a troubling pattern of manipulative behavior. By the time she reaches her teenage years, counselors have noted her disruptive tendencies, diagnosing her with intermittent rage issues. Her home life offers no respite. It's rumored her father occasionally drinks heavily, and her mother vacillates between stern punishments and silent withdrawal. Kelly's education never truly takes off. She attends a community college but drops out halfway through, drifting between minimum wage jobs, waitress, cashier, part-time office assistant. Most employers describe her as capable when she wants to be, but given to bouts of sudden anger or, conversely, strange detachment. Socially, she can be engaging, even charming, especially to men who find her combination of vulnerability and confidence attractive. Yet those who spend prolonged time with Kelly sense something off. A simmering frustration behind her eyes, an underlying resentment toward the world at large. Mentally, Kelly's history includes episodes of depression and anxiety. She is briefly seen by a psychologist who suggests borderline personality traits, but no long-term treatment ever takes hold. She moves frequently, unable to maintain steady employment for long, and when she finally marries Jason Cochran, many who know her hope that stability might calm her demons. Before Jason, there were relationships marked by infidelity and allegations of emotional abuse. She is known to dominate her partners, exercising a degree of emotional control that leaves them drained and compliant. Financially, she and Jason struggle. Some friends suspect she resents this deeply, coveting a better life without the means or patience to achieve it. Jason Cochran, on the other hand, is 40, a bit overweight, with a gentle, round face and kind blue eyes that often look tired. He grew up in a small Michigan town and is described by old classmates as friendly but quiet, always on the fringes of social groups rather than at the center. He works as a machinist and later tries his hand at various manual labor jobs. He isn't the type to complain. Instead, he endures. Family members say he grew up as the dependable one, caring for younger siblings, lending money when he barely had any, and shouldering burdens others refused to carry. Unlike Kelly, Jason's mental health history remains relatively unremarkable. No official diagnoses, no wild outbursts. But there's a resigned sadness in him, as if he believes life's hardships simply must be borne in silence. Over time, Jason falls under Kelly's spell. Maybe he admires her rebellious streak, or perhaps he feels needed by a woman who claims to crave his stability. They wed quietly, in a brief civil ceremony. Few guests attend. In the Iron River community, they blend in, though neighbors do note how Kelly seems to run the household. Financial struggles persist. They rent small homes, sometimes move unexpectedly. Each relocation isolates them further from extended family and old friends. Kelly takes up odd habits, collecting strange knickknacks, spending long hours online talking to strangers. She becomes fascinated by true crime stories and discusses them with a disturbingly casual tone. Early warning signs surface. A coworker recalls Kelly laughing about a brutal murder case she read about, as if it were a grand joke. Another friend remembers her reaction to a minor argument. Kelly grows quiet, eerily so, and then mutters about how some people just need to be taught a lesson. The victims in this horrifying narrative are twofold. First, Chris Regan, a middle-aged man in his early 50s who once worked alongside Kelly at a local factory. And second, Jason Cochran himself. Chris is a hard-working man with graying hair, a trim mustache, and a penchant for corny jokes. He's recently divorced, trying to rebuild his life, and thinking about moving south for a better job opportunity. He is described by friends as honest, reliable, and polite, though somewhat lonely. He dreams of starting fresh, maybe finding love again. Around town, people know him as a quiet fellow who minds his own business. He maintains a small circle of friends and occasionally goes fishing in the nearby lakes. Chris has a grown son living in another state and a few relatives scattered across the Midwest. He's no stranger to life's disappointments, but he tries to keep a positive outlook. In late 2014, he vanishes, and that absence sends ripples of worry through those who know him. His last known activity involves making plans with Kelly Cochran, something he shares casually with a buddy. He has no idea this decision might seal his fate. Then there's Jason Cochran, Kelly's husband. Initially, nobody thinks of Jason as a victim, because he's right there with Kelly, fielding questions from neighbors and eventually from police. He's a quiet man who wants a stable life, a decent home, and peace. He seldom socializes outside of the marriage. He occasionally watches sports on television, tinkers in the garage, and tries to ignore the strange tension simmering in his own home. In early 2016, he is found dead in suspicious circumstances, and suddenly everything changes. Family members cry out in disbelief. Kelly claims it's a tragic accident, but the autopsy and subsequent findings prove otherwise. There are bruises, odd marks, and a lethal dose of drugs in his system. People who once saw him as Kelly's loyal partner now realize that he too has joined the ranks of her victims. The Iron River area, population just shy of 3,000, sits in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, surrounded by dense forests, rolling hills, and sprawling lakes. It is early 2016, and the winter shows no mercy. Snow piles up on rooftops. Smoke curls from chimneys. The community is tight-knit, a place where everyone knows your name at the grocery store, and your business is never entirely your own. Timber, mining, and small industry jobs keep people afloat, though the economy has seen better days. The old mines have been silent for years, and the younger generation often dreams of escaping to bigger cities. Yet, there is safety here, or so most believe. Doors remain unlocked, and people greet strangers with a nod. It's a place where a homicide would make headlines for months, shaking the core of residents who take pride in their low crime rates. In late January 2016, As the sun sets early and temperatures dip below zero, a local deputy receives a call about a suspicious absence. This is how it begins. The smell of wet wool and coffee in the police station's break room mingles with uncertainty. Soon detectives canvass the small town, checking bars, diners, logging roads. They talk to co-workers who last saw Chris Regan in 2014 before he disappeared without a trace. They examine old evidence, hoping that new developments might shed fresh light. Meanwhile, in a modest wooden home on the outskirts, Kelly Cochran sits in the living room, the television on low, while the furnace hums steadily. She knows what they are looking for. She glances at Jason. He looks at his feet, avoiding her eyes. The tension inside that home is thick enough to taste, like iron and despair. He looks up at her. Iron River's biggest landmark is the old mining museum, a testament to a community forged by hard labor and endurance. Nearby lakes reflect the gray winter sky. The people here pride themselves on safety, neighborliness, and moral uprightness. Before the Cochran case, crime is minimal. A burglary here, a traffic accident there, items belonging to Chris Regan hidden near the Cochran residence. Rumors spread like wildfire. The local paper, usually filled with fishing reports and high school sports scores, suddenly prints alarming headlines. Cable news vans appear on these quiet streets. Residents eye each other nervously, wondering how something so horrendous could have unfolded right under their noses. This region has seen job losses as industries closed. Some say the diminishing prospects breed resentment and unrest. In this socioeconomic environment, tension sometimes creeps into households, but rarely does it end in murder. Yet, here we are, confronted with a nightmare. On a remote patch of ground, surrounded by stunted pines and frost-bitten ferns, investigators locate remains that forensic teams painstakingly identify. A passing hunter recalls a strange smell lingering in the air. Wind whistles through the trees. Snow softens footsteps. The solemn hush of winter nights turns sinister as crime scene tape flutters in the breeze. The community's perception of safety dissolves, replaced by anxiety, anger, and a desperate need to understand what went wrong. The relationship between Kelly and Jason Cochran begins nearly a decade before the murders, though accounts vary on how they met. Some say Jason worked at a tool and die shop near the Indiana border and Kelly applied for a secretarial position there. Others claim they met at a roadside diner, bonding over bad coffee and shared frustrations. What's certain is that their first encounters happen in the mid-2000s, at a time when both are seeking something to fill the empty spaces in their lives. Jason, shy and unassertive, is drawn to Kelly's audacity. Kelly, needing someone stable to anchor her drifting existence, sees in Jason a man she can mold to fit her needs. Their initial impressions are mild, even pleasant. Kelly flirts openly, laying on compliments that make Jason blush. He thinks she's exciting, different from the quiet women he's dated before. She senses his vulnerability. Within a few months they move in together. Friends describe a whirlwind romance. Dinners out, weekend getaways to local attractions, and long talks about starting a family. But beneath this veneer, subtle cracks form. Kelly criticizes Jason's low-paid job, pushes him to work overtime, and demands constant reassurance. She withholds affection strategically, conditioning him to jump through hoops just to earn a kind word. The power dynamic becomes lopsided. Jason tries to please her, hoping her occasional kindness will blossom into genuine love. As the years pass, key moments define their relationship. When finances falter, Kelly turns hostile, accusing Jason of failing her. When he lands a slightly better job, she softens briefly, promising a brighter future. They share secretive glances at family gatherings, excluding others from their private world. Relatives worry that Kelly's dominance is unhealthy, that Jason seems smaller, quieter, and more subdued than ever before. Co-workers notice bruises on Jason's arms, though he shrugs them off as workplace accidents. Kelly grows increasingly private, forbidding Jason from contacting certain old friends. She intercepts phone calls, checks his messages, and installs a lock on the spare room where she keeps personal items. Outsiders sense something is off, but no one intervenes effectively. At one point, Kelly begins an affair with Chris Regan. It starts innocently enough, just friendly banter at work, sharing jokes during coffee breaks. Chris, lonely after his divorce, finds Kelly interesting. She shows him attention and curiosity. Soon they meet outside of work, maybe grabbing a drink at a local bar after their shift. Kelly smiles at him in a way that makes him feel special, needed. She hints at dissatisfaction in her marriage, implying Jason is too dull, too constrained. Chris hesitates. He's not one for drama. But the chemistry pulls him in. They arrange secret rendezvous in a secluded clearing by an abandoned railroad track. The hush of the surrounding pines witnesses whispered conversations and stolen kisses. Others notice. A coworker remarks that Kelly's been spending a lot of time with Chris, and Chris seems lighter, happier. Maybe he's found love again. Jason grows suspicious. Kelly denies any wrongdoing, turning the blame on him for being paranoid. He grows anxious, pacing at night. He drinks more heavily, and colleagues see a man under strain. She lectures him about trust, about loyalty. She claims Chris is just a friend, helping her deal with problems Jason can't understand. She mocks his insecurities, reducing him to a defeated, trembling figure. Warnings start to pop up. Kelly's best friend tries to talk to her, urging her to consider counseling, or at least to end the affair if she's unhappy. Instead, Kelly reacts defensively, cutting off the friend. Another acquaintance tries to invite Jason out for a beer, to talk man-to-man, but Jason declines, glancing nervously at the door before making an excuse. Whispered rumors float through the community. Is Kelly abusive? Is Jason trapped? And what about Chris? Does he realize the danger he's in? Neighbors recall strange incidents, late-night arguments at the Cochran house, muffled screams, and the sound of something heavy dragged across the floor. Once, a passerby sees Kelly storming out of the garage, eyes wild, fists clenched. Another time, Jason appears in the local hardware store with a broken wrist, stammering about slipping on ice. Yet no one steps forward to help. Perhaps they fear getting involved, or maybe they think it's none of their business. Each red flag is ignored, each warning sign dismissed. The relationship barrels forward, a train on faulty tracks, bound for disaster. Trigger events ignite the crisis in late 2014. Kelly is furious that Chris might be leaving Iron River for a new job. She feels abandoned, betrayed. Jason discovers explicit texts between Kelly and Chris, and his heart sinks. For Kelly, the solution to her tangled feelings, her anger at Chris's departure, her frustration with Jason's passivity, takes a perverse turn. She confronts Chris in their secret meeting spot. It's a cool autumn evening, leaves crunching underfoot. She cries, begs him not to go, then grows cold and accusatory when he hesitates. Unknown to Chris, Jason lurks nearby, coerced by Kelly into a bizarre pact. She has hinted that if Chris leaves her, life is meaningless, and someone must pay for this heartbreak. Her behavior escalates. Kelly becomes obsessed with controlling everyone around her. Jason tries to reason with her, but she snarls that he's useless. The tension reaches fever pitch. They argue about finances, the mortgage, and the fact that Kelly is planning something unspeakable. Jason senses death in the air. He's terrified, torn between love and fear. He contemplates calling the police, but hesitates, unsure if they'll believe him. He thinks about running away, but has nowhere to go. In a near-miss incident, Chris's friend stops by unannounced, and Kelly nearly loses control, hiding suspicious items just before the visitor steps through the door. There are changes in Kelly's routine: late-night drives, secret phone calls. She purchases strange cleaning supplies and a freezer chest that Jason helps carry into the garage. He notices she's stockpiling something, but can't bring himself to ask. Instead, he pours his drink and drops it on the floor in front of the couch. Around town, Kelly appears agitated, snapping at a waitress who's too slow with her coffee, glaring at a bank teller who asks too many questions. Chris, oblivious to the mortal peril he's in, tries to finalize plans to leave town. He mentions to a colleague that he's meeting Kelly one last time to talk things through. The colleague suggests it's a bad idea, but Chris shrugs it off, saying Kelly just needs closure. This is a missed opportunity. If only someone had intervened, warned him forcefully. But no one does, and Chris walks willingly into the trap. The last warning sign comes in the form of a text message Chris sends a friend. "I'm off to see Kelly. Wish me luck." The friend doesn't respond in time. By midnight, it's too late. On a chilly October evening in 2014, around 11:30 p.m., Chris Regan steps onto the damp forest floor near Iron River. The moon is half covered by drifting clouds, and a faint drizzle has turned the fallen leaves slick. Chris wears a warm jacket and boots, expecting this conversation might run late. Kelly emerges from the darkness, her breath visible in the cold night air. Unknown to Chris, Jason is hidden behind a clump of spruce trees, heart pounding, clutching a weapon, a small caliber handgun Kelly forced into his trembling hands. The plan is hers, every detail orchestrated with chilling calculation. They argue softly at first, Kelly complaining that Chris is abandoning her. Chris tries to reassure her, it's nothing personal, he needs a better life. Kelly grows enraged, her voice rising. She accuses him of using her. Then, as Chris begins to step back, sensing danger, Kelly lunges. From the darkness, Jason stumbles forward. A shot rings out. Chris collapses, stunned disbelief on his face. Kelly kneels beside him. Her eyes are cold. She does not weep. Jason hovers, trembling, sickened by what they've done. The drizzle intensifies, pattering on leaves, washing faint ribbons of blood into the soil. They work quickly, methodically. They have come prepared with tools. The screams have faded to silence. Hours later, they dispose of evidence, scattering fragments and belongings so they won't be easily found. Dawn breaks over a crime scene that looks, at a glance, like any other remote woodland patch, yet a keen observer might notice disturbed soil, a broken branch, a length of rope partially buried under wet leaves. At 7:15 a.m., a hunter passing by hears something, maybe a muffled sob, maybe just the wind, but dismisses it. That morning, no one calls the police because no one yet knows Chris is missing. When Chris fails to show up for work, co-workers grow worried. They file a missing persons report. The Iron River Police, initially treating it as a routine missing case, dispatch an officer to Chris's home. The house is locked. The officer peers through a window. Everything looks normal, except Chris's car is gone. Days turn into weeks. Eventually, detectives find Chris's car parked near a remote trailhead. Inside, they uncover personal items in a pamphlet about relocation. This turns the case from a mystery to a suspected foul play scenario. They question Kelly, who feigns ignorance, claiming she hasn't seen Chris recently. Jason stands beside her, eyes fixed on the floor, silent and pale. Evidence begins to accumulate. A witness saw Kelly meeting Chris shortly before he vanished. In Chris's belongings, police find Kelly's name and number jotted on a notepad. Someone recalls seeing Kelly's truck near the trailhead late one night. Gradually, suspicion narrows on the Cochrans. Still, no body is found. Without a body, the case stalls. Investigators keep files open, monitor Kelly and Jason, and periodically re-interview anyone who might know something. Forensic experts analyze soil samples taken from Kelly's property, find tiny bone fragments and suspicious stains. The puzzle pieces are scattered, but slowly forming a grim picture. Fast forward to early 2016, Jason Cochran suddenly dies under strange circumstances. Paramedics arrive at the Cochrans' home at 2:45 a.m. on February 20, 2016, responding to Kelly's frantic 911 call that her husband isn't breathing. The scene is odd. Jason is in bed, appearing peaceful at first glance, but an autopsy reveals he died from a lethal mix of drugs and asphyxiation. Detectives arrive, searching the premises more thoroughly this time. They find hidden compartments in the garage and odd notes that seem to reference Chris Regan's disappearance. Now, alarm bells ring loudly. Kelly's denials start to waver. She contradicts herself during interrogation, growing defensive, then hostile. Police procedures shift into high gear. They secure the Cochrans' home as a potential homicide scene. In bright February sunlight, crime scene technicians in white suits comb through every nook and cranny. They use luminol to detect blood traces on the garage floor. They uncover weapons, knives, saws, an old firearm with the serial number filed off. Witness interviews intensify. Neighbors recall late-night noises and a foul odor months back. Forensic findings confirm that bone fragments in the yard belonged to Chris Regan. Expert consultations revealed dismemberment, a shocking level of brutality. Breaking developments hit the local news. Kelly Cochran is brought in for questioning, her eyes darting nervously, her demeanor shifting between calculated calm and seething anger. With a solid timeline in hand, Chris Regan's last known contact in October 2014, Jason Cochran's suspicious death in February 2016, detectives feel confident they have their suspect. Kelly emerges as the architect of these crimes, luring Chris to his doom and then silencing Jason when he becomes a liability or a potential witness. Search warrants yield key discoveries. Emails between Kelly and Chris, phone records placing Kelly near the crime scene, and a hidden flash drive containing disturbing personal notes. Confronted with mounting evidence, Kelly breaks down, offering partial confessions, blaming Jason for some parts and herself for others. Police know better. They've heard her contradictions. The case is strong enough for an arrest. Exorcism. Arrest comes on March 2, 2016. Kelly is handcuffed, escorted out of her home as neighbors watch from behind curtains. Charges are filed: first-degree murder for Chris Regan's death, and later, murder charges related to Jason's death. The court appearances draw crowds. Kelly stands before a judge, wearing jail-issued clothing, her hair tied back severely. She pleads not guilty. The media swarms the courthouse lawn. Cable news trucks park along the street. The prosecutor's office prepares a meticulous case. Witness testimonies are lined up. The co-worker who last saw Chris, the detectives who found the bone fragments, the forensic experts who matched DNA. The defense attempts to portray Kelly as a victim of Jason's manipulations, an abused wife who feared for her life. But the jury sees through it, thanks to the prosecution's methodical approach. The trial begins in late 2017. Journalists scribble notes as the lead prosecutor, a stern woman in her 40s, delivers opening statements. She outlines the brutality, the cunning planning. An expert testifies about the bone fragments, describing how they confirm Chris Regan's identity. Another explains the drugs found in Jason's system. Kelly's demeanor during the trial fluctuates, sometimes defiant, sometimes tearful, but the witness testimonies are damning. A close friend of Kelly's admits Kelly once joked about getting rid of people who disappointed her. The defense tries to argue diminished capacity, calling a psychiatrist who suggests Kelly suffered from severe mental health issues. But the prosecution counters with diaries and text messages where Kelly seems fully aware of her actions. Verdict day arrives in spring 2017. The jury finds Kelly Cochran guilty of murder. The courtroom is silent as the judge reads the sentence. Life in prison without parole. Appeals are filed, but none succeed in overturning the verdict. The community breathes a sigh of relief. Justice, they believe, has been served. 6. 1 is silent. 2 speak. 3 perform background checks. 4 and 11. Aftermath ripples through the region. Chris Regan's family weeps openly outside the courthouse, embracing one another. Jason Cochran's relatives struggle to reconcile the man they loved with the horrors that befell him. Memorial services for Chris are held by the lake he once fished at. A plaque is dedicated in his name near a local community center. The townspeople of Iron River lock their doors more often now, feeling the chill of what happened lingering in the crisp northern air. Media coverage slowly fades, but the memory remains. Newspaper editorials call for better mental health resources, hoping to prevent another tragedy. The local police department conducts internal reviews, seeking earlier intervention methods. Nearby communities discuss legislative changes. Perhaps stricter regulations on firearm ownership for those with histories of violence, or improved communication between states to track individuals with troubling pasts. Long-term effects show up in subtle ways. Neighbors check in on each other more frequently, ensuring someone doesn't slip silently into danger. Public workshops on domestic violence and psychological abuse attract sizable crowds. A state senator proposes a bill to improve protections for abuse victims. Over time, the legacy of the Cochran case becomes a cautionary tale about unchecked anger, secrecy, and the fragile trust that holds communities together. Experts reflect on the psychological aspects: Kelly's manipulative nature, her capacity for cruelty disguised under a veneer of normalcy, and Jason's tragic inability to break free. They point out societal impacts, the fear and suspicion that now lingers where warmth and openness once thrived. In media retrospectives, the case is framed as a reminder that monsters can hide in plain sight. Future true crime documentaries highlight how the Cochrans lived ordinary lives on the surface, blending into their surroundings while harboring deadly intentions. People ask themselves how they missed the warning signs and vow to be more vigilant. The state institutes a hotline for suspicious domestic situations, offering counseling and rapid response teams. In the end, the Cochran murders stand as a dark chapter in Iron River's history, one that cannot be erased, but can serve as a stark warning to others. It shows how love twisted into something malignant can lead to unimaginable cruelty. It teaches that intervention, no matter how uncomfortable, can save lives. The community will never be the same, but perhaps it has grown wiser and more protective of its own. It's December 2nd, 2020, the community will never be the same, but perhaps it has grown wiser and more protective of its own. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories. If you found this case compelling, you might also want to learn about the unsettling case of Belle Gunness in early 1900s Indiana, or the mysterious disappearance of Maura Murray. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe earlier intervention could have prevented these tragic deaths? What warning signs stood out to you the most? Let's keep the conversation going and hope that by understanding the past, we can prevent such horrors in the future.